residency in the USA. My name is Jonas Kurkulas, and I am a member of the preclinical education team of the UIMS, which you might know that is a non-profit organization that connects all of the medical faculties of the Czech Republic. And I will be hosting today's lecture. Today we will tell you everything you need to know about the USMLE exam and the residency application for the USA. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker today, Dr. Behsheed Barootkoob, who is a graduate of the Charles University of the LF1, the first faculty in Prague, and is now a pediatric resident in the US. So without further ado, I'll hand the torch over to Dr. Barootkoob to share her knowledge on the matter.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. You pronounced my name so well. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
many people can't pronounce it, so that's really nice. All right,
I'm
guys.
glad to hear that.
So can you see my screen? I'm going to go into slideshow. Just somebody let me know if it looks like in presentation mode. Does it work?
Yeah, it works perfect.
All right, guys. So like you were told, I'm Dr. Behsheed Barootkoob. I'm a first-year pediatric resident. I work at Sinai Hospital of Baltimore in Maryland in the United States. I graduated from First Faculty of Medicine last year in 2023 in June. So I know that a lot of you guys might be at different stages of continuing your application and wanting to pursue residency in the US. So I will touch on like different parts like USMLE and the application, but just please feel free to ask questions if it's something that's more relevant to you. I wrote like a more general outline, and then just tell me what applies to you guys more if you have more specific questions about USMLE or application process based on where you are in the process. So generally, what do I need to apply for residency in the US? So before you apply for residency, before I start even, residency is basically just further training in the United States. We don't do foundation years like the UK foundation F1, F2. We don't have that. So in almost most specialties, you will directly go into the specialty that you're interested in. So what you need is step 1 and step 2 to apply. Then obviously you need to pass those. Preferably you need clinical experience in the United States before applying in your preferred field of interest. So this can be really hard to get from at least the experience I had. There are organizations that help you, like, can you guys see my cursor if I like circle around something? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So there are organizations like USMLE Start, the AMO opportunities. I'm sure you've heard of AMO. I think they do a lot of like advertisement through our university. Personally, from my own experience, it can be a little bit more pricey, AMO. USMLE Start was one of those that I personally like found myself, one of those organizations that helps organize a clinical experience for you. You still have to pay, but it's cheaper. Sometimes you can get clinical experiences through, like, if you have a connection or you know someone who can get you, for you to shadow somewhere. But in those cases, it's usually more a shadowing experience and less hands-on. And what I mean by that is like you'll shadow the work of another doctor, but you won't be like super involved in the care of like, rounding on your own patients and writing notes and things like that. But if you were to like pay for experiences, a lot of times you can be involved in the care of the patient, which, that is the ideal experience you want to have when applying, because they do differentiate between those things. But whether it's an observership where you observed or shadowed, or you were like hands-on involved and it was like a full-on rotation. So it is a difference. So I think it's worth paying for that so that you get the full experience. Before I go into volunteering experiences, when you do these clinical experiences in the US, you can get recommendation letters. You need 4 recommendation letters, 3 to 4 recommendation letters when you're applying. I recommend getting recommendation letters from the places you rotate at, especially if you leave a good impression. You can rotate at a place that you rotated at, so you can get a recommendation letter from them. I've heard it's also a good idea to get a recommendation letter from our own university. It is what I did as well. But if I were to go back and do something differently, is if there was a doctor I worked with for a long time, whether it was like on a research project, or for example, if some of your anatomy dissectors or assistants or something like that, if there's a doctor you worked with very closely, they can write you a better letter because they know you. So the quality of your letter, the quality of anyone recommending you really matters in the US. These type of things really matter when you're applying. In terms of clinical experiences, other than paying for these like USMLE SARS, the AMR opportunities, if you are organized and smart with your timing, because it can be overwhelming. You can organize to do a clinical experience through a lot of like some of the universities in the US provide those. If you apply for them, you can do it through a university or like through a medical school, something like that. But it can be harder to get. It can be more competitive, and there's like specific times you have to apply for them. So obviously, if you pay for these organizations that are curated for international graduates, for international students like us, then this is easier. But it you have to pay for it, and there's all of that things. And generally, they recommend when you're applying, you will see they will say it's not required to have clinical experience, but it is definitely recommended. And it is definitely something that makes you a more competitive applicant if you have 2 to 3 months of clinical experience in the United States. On top of that, having the majority of your letters from them and having like one letter from our university or doctor you worked with closely that's outside of the US is a good idea as well. So in terms of volunteering experiences and activities around, again, extracurricular activities revolving around your field of interest. Again, I think they really like to see that you're committed to the field you're applying to. So any volunteering extracurricular activities that you have that revolve around, like for example, I will talk about myself. If I did pediatrics, so I would like when I was still a med student, I would teach in like I would teach English at an orphanage online. So it's like things towards children or things towards like curating your application around your specialty, so it looks like you really want to do this. Personal statement is just when you're applying, you have to write like a letter of motivation of why I want to do this specialty. And obviously, while you're applying, you also have to submit your results. I don't know how much weight this carries. I know like when I was as a med student, I really was like worried about that. Like, oh, will they look at like a specific grade, or does it matter? I mean, I think that, for example, I was applying to pediatrics, so I think my grade in pediatrics mattered, but I don't know generally the weight that it carries, but it is part of the procedure that you have to submit your results. I do know that you do have to report it. There is a specific question they ask if you have been on ISB. So if you have taken an extra year, you do have to report it. That is there. In terms of research, so medical students in the US are very well-rounded in that sense that a lot of them have research. And I feel like coming from someone from our background at our medical schools, it can be hard to get that type of exposure sometimes. If you're aiming for more competitive specialties like surgery, radiology, something like that, I 100% recommend you to do some sort of research. Whether it is, I know some of my friends and medical students that were doing research with specific departments at our university. And in that case, I would definitely recommend if you can, like if you're in third year, and like obviously if you're in sixth year right now, this is not something you can really implement now. But if you are more early in your process, then you can for sure reach out to doctors and try to get involved in research, reach out to many doctors in our university and try to see if there's any opportunities for you to get involved in research projects. And I think that really strengthens your application. You can always, like, again, through these USMLE SART and all, there are ways that you can like be involved in publications and like literature review papers and things like that. And it might, honestly, on a grand scheme of things, it's kind of just like a checkbox, something you just have to do, just so that you have it on your application that you published some paper. Yeah, I know some of my friends and some of my seniors as well that wanted to do certain more competitive specialties, and you can apply before. This is not a requirement, like I don't want to scare you because that's not what I did. That's not my friends who went into internal medicine did either. But I have friends who wanted to either get into a very, very good program or get into like a more competitive specialty, and they applied for like a research position in the United States. A lot of universities will take us like graduates as a research fellow, and that is unpaid, but it's like basically you do research at a really big university. I know a lot of our graduates who went into Yale, Mass Gen, which is with Harvard, to do a research year because it's unpaid. So we can get placements there, and it really strengthens your application, but it is a year of your life. So at least a year of your life. So you really have to like weigh your costs and like what are your priorities. I don't know if I overwhelmed with you guys with those information. Please, if you have any specific questions, I will touch more into like step exams and specifics of the application process in my next slides. But if you have any specific questions about clinical experiences, research, volunteering, please ask me now.
I have a question actually. Does it matter if the research is like an original one, or it can be a review? Like, what do you consider as like a strong like research opportunity?
Yeah. So obviously, a strong research opportunity is an original project, and that you work with like a senior doctor and things like that. But I do want to say, like, having, I think you said literature reviews and things like that. That's what I had personally myself. I think having that is better than nothing. And like I said, it's like a checkbox for a lot. Like it just kind of like looks like you did some research. You are familiar with how to do research or review research, to write further, like, to write a research paper type of thing. So any research is better than no research. Again, you can still match without research, but I would definitely say original research projects that you did over like a year or two, 100% better, especially if you're aiming for competitive specialties. If you're aiming for more classic specialties like internal medicine or pediatrics or family medicine, I would say literature reviews, those type of research paper things are accepted.
Okay, thank you.
Guys, any other questions about clinical experiences, volunteering?
Hello, I have a question. I wanted to ask, like, if I want to match into a specialty and if I'm going to go to the US to do an internship, should I focus on doing an internship in that specialty or does it not matter?
Okay. What specialty are you thinking?
I'm thinking peds as well.
Okay. So I think the majority of your internships should be curated towards the specialty you want to apply to. So if you want to do peds, definitely I would think of like doing a peds rotation, whether outpatient or inpatient. Inpatient can be a bit harder to get. Outpatient rotations can be a little bit easier to find. I do want to add, an internal medicine rotation is like a foundation type of thing. So having an internal medicine rotation, regardless of the specialty you will end up applying to, can be good for your, like, it can strengthen your application. So I think generally it's a good idea, but having specific internships, like if you want to do peds, having peds rotate internships makes it look like, you really like this field. So definitely prioritizing rotations for your own specialty. I do want to add on top of about the rotations is I've seen people who like apply and do a rotation in like cardiology. Um, Not that it's bad, you know, obviously, like if that's the field you're interested in, sure. But cardiology is not a residency you will directly match into. That is a fellowship. So first you have to do 3 years of internal medicine and then apply to cardiology. So as a medical student, you should be doing a rotation in internal medicine if you know that's adult medicine that you're interested in. That way it strengthens your foundation. And then if you were to do a cardiology rotation on top of it, that's okay. But if that's all you have is like a specialized rotation, it's not, I would say it's not the best. So that is something I've seen. So I just wanted to, because I know a couple people were doing that. So just wanted to add on that. Any other specific questions you guys have about rotations before I move on? Okay. Okay. USMLE exams. So step one is now has become pass and fail. When I did it, it was not pass and fail. It was graded. It being pass and fail, I feel like takes a lot of pressure off because you just need to pass it now. And the passing grade is 196, which is low. So I think it's pretty doable to pass step one now. I do want to say that in the past, when step one was graded and not just pass and fail, I feel like it would prepare you more in the sense that you had a really strong foundation, and then doing step two made it so like you start at a higher baseline. But now it's more like a pass and fail, so you know your foundation might not be as strong because you were just aiming to pass. I still think that step one is an exam. Now that it's just pass and fail, it's great to just get it out of the way if this is what you want to do. And I do recommend generally doing your step one before you end up doing a rotation in the US. Obviously, again, it's your preference, but I just think like, US residency pathway is an expensive pathway if you were to compare it to like UK. So it's something like getting that out of the way so that you know, okay, I passed the initial exam. Now I can like focus on like getting 1 or 2 rotations in and then doing my step two. When to do your step one? Step one has pharmacology. So I did it after my 4th year. So the summer after my 4th year. I think that's what we do for it. Yeah. I know some people who are doing it in after 3rd year, but they were studying pharma on their own. If that works for you, sure. But personally, I want to do pharma and then do it, take my time. Step two is graded. The grade on your step two matters. Passing grade is 214. The average grade for step two in 2023 is when I did it myself, was 248. Now, talking about like the average grade being 248, it's pretty, some of you might think, okay, that's a pretty high average grade. Step two, generally people tend to score better on step two compared to back when we had a grade for step one. Like, okay, your grade matters to an extent. Like, obviously, if you have not a good grade at all, like, it's very far from an average, obviously it matters. But for you to feel like there's like a threshold you need to reach, and then if you don't make that grade, then like you're not gonna match or you're not gonna get a job. That's not how it works. When I was a med student, I thought the grade carried a lot of weight. I thought the grade mattered more than it actually did once I applied. So your application as a whole matters a lot in the US rather than just your grade. So there are people who have lower grades, for example, than you or whatever, like than they did than me, and ended up having more interviews. That's just because it's like an overall look at your application rather than just looking at your grade. Looking at like if your whole application is well-rounded rather than just you having a good grade. Or I know people who had really, really high grades, like 95th percentile, 99th percentile, or something like that. And, you know, when you have a grade like that, you would think like, well, every university program is going to want me. But as an international student, again, you having a crazy good grade is not everything, unfortunately. And a lot of other things like your recommendation letters, your volunteering experience, your clinical experience play a huge role. So I think, you know, don't obsess over your grade, but understand that, especially for more competitive specializations, having an above average grade is an important factor in your application. I do want to show, do I have it? Yeah, before I ask like you guys if you have any specific questions about STEP exams. I couldn't find the most recent one, so this might not be like super accurate. Like I don't think this is from this is not from this year, so like the most recent year, but it just tells like a pattern, like a general pattern. So depending on the specialty you're going for, the average grade of the applicant that gets a job, so matches, is different. So for example, family medicine has a lower average step 2 grade. So the dark blue is people who match, so they, you know, got a job. And then the green one is people who did not. So clearly you see it overlaps. So that tells you your grade is not everything. But as you can see, it's like much, much lower, the average, like the range of grades, for example, compared to general surgery. So, you know, there were people who did not match in general surgery with a 245. And this is, keep in mind, this is for American graduates. We'll get into that later, like the differentiation of being an American graduate versus a foreign graduate. So yeah, or like, for example, here, pediatrics. Yeah, so pediatrics, again, huge range, but pediatrics is also not a very competitive specialty. It's relatively easier to get into, a more approachable specialization, especially for a foreign graduate. So it's a, you know, a lower grade that you can aim for. Same, whereas internal medicine is the same, but like, for example, if you were to look at radiology, you know, there were people who did not match with a 255. So it's like generally, and this is the pattern that you see, like some specialties are very competitive and generally people who match have a higher grade, and then there are specialties that people have matched with lower grades. Any specific questions about STEP exams? No? All right, guys. Now, studying for the STEP USMLE exam. So for step 1, first aid book, the USMLE step 1 book, first aid book, is really important in terms of learning your foundation knowledge. You know, you basically just have to sit and read the book. It's a big book. But UWorld, on top of that, UWorld is a really important resource. UWorld is basically like a question bank. So there's a bunch of questions, and you like, you know, you can learn through their explanation. So when you get a question right or wrong, there's a lot of explanation. You can learn through that. And it's important, like, to use UWorld like a learning tool, not like a testing tool, because you can learn a lot through UWorld rather than just test yourself. So that's why I say it's important to start UWorld early for both step 1 and in step 2, and not just read a book, because test taking skills are super important for USMLE exams, and UWorld teaches you those test taking skills. There is a first aid book for step 2. Personally, I did not use it. Maybe I literally opened it maybe like 1 time, 2 times, because UWorld is so useful. And literally, if you do UWorld question bank 2 times, I feel like that's more than enough. So I didn't use the first aid book for step 2. For step 1, the first aid book is very important. and it has a lot of information for you. On top of that, obviously for step 1, I did sketches. You guys know sketches. We use sketches, you know, for micro, farm, patho. Some of us use it for pathology. So sketches were great. There's Anki. Anki is like a flashcards system. Really, really good for remembering key details, stupid information about like genetic things that they test you on. And it's like flashcards that basically, if you know things, it will show you the flashcard later. And if you don't know it, it will show you the flashcard earlier. So the system makes it so like you don't see a flashcard that you know well often, and then it's something you don't know well, you will see it more often. So it's a really well-made system. Anki's personally is a lot of commitment. I used it, but I would say I didn't use it religiously, like strictly. But if you can't commit to Anki's, Anki's are great. They boost your grades. I really recommend Anki's if you can commit to it. Amboss, you guys know, I don't know if our university still, I know first faculty would like sponsor us to have an Amboss membership to an extent. I used Amboss for step 1 and step 2 just because I had the membership from university, and it was a great second question bank on top of UWorld. And the questions were a little different than UWorld, so I liked it. There is also MBME mock exam. So MBME is like an organization that organizes the step exams, American organization. You can pay to do mock exams. So basically they're like long, they're like 4 hours, I think. Like, so then it like simulates a real exam to an extent and gives you like a grade or tells you like areas you need to improve on. And I think I really recommend doing a couple of them before going for your exam, because you like doing one like a month or 2 months before your exam and then doing another one as you get closer. It tells you like what is your baseline grade, how much you need to improve based on what you're aiming for, especially for step 2. Yeah, but you know, you have to pay for those separately. There is, I think, like offline versions, but I do not endorse that. You can find them if you want. Other than that, what I want to say, yeah, so those are the main resources, guys. If you I do want to say that step 1 exam is, gosh, I don't know, was it 7 hours, or I think it was 7 or 8 hours, and then step 2 exams an hour longer, so I think 8 hours or 9. So you know, these are really long exams, and you study for them for months. So it's a big commitment. I think it pays off in the end, but for those of you who are just considering US now, I think it's important to consider all of that on top of the cost. Any specific questions about STEP exams, USMLE, studying?
Hi, yes, I have one question. So I was wondering, when would you start studying for step 1 in advance?
When would I start studying?
Yeah.
So like I said, there's farm in step 1. So I would say doing it after you finish 4th year. So I did it in that summer. So basically I think I studied from June to like October, but like, or like July. I think realistically I studied like if I studied seriously from July to October. I do want to say there was a grade back then. So I was aiming for a certain grade. So I had to study for longer to reach that grade. If I was aiming to pass, I could have done my exam a month earlier. So I think now that there is pass and fail, I think it's something you should just do mock exams. And once you're consistently passing, to just do your exam. So not to put a lot of pressure on yourself. But I would say like 2 months. So July to October is what I studied, but keep in mind I had to have a grade. So I was studying for a longer time.
As well as you probably also have to register at some examination center. So
Yeah.
Is it usually like 2 to 3 months in advance as well?
Yeah, you can register. You can register like I think up to 6 months in advance, but you can even register a week out before. Like it's a huge range that you can register, but there is something like a scheduling permit that you have to get. Um, and that can take like 2 weeks to come sometimes. So do not leave it for last minute in case your scheduling permit doesn't reach in time. But this is like very there's a process if you Google it, like how to apply, how to register, how to set it up. It is there. But yes, give yourself, I would say, at least like a month and a half to like register it. Also, back when I did step one, we had a center in Prague. Um, I think they closed the center because I couldn't do my step two in Prague and I had to do it in Germany. So I don't know if they restarted the center in Prague or you guys also have to like go do it in Germany. So that's also things to keep in mind, like timing wise for yourself and making sure the dates are available for you. Because sometimes the dates can get full. So yes, at least I would say a month in advance.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Also, I had one question. Which Anki decks did you use for step one?
Oh my God.
Anki?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the names. Wait, gosh, I don't remember. I'm
Maybe I
sorry.
can help you out. Was it Janki?
Yeah, I used Danke, and there was another one. I think it was
Pepper?
Light, or
Lightyear?
maybe that's. Yeah, Danke. I used Danke, and then I think Lightyear. Lightyear was one of them, but I did use Danke. Yeah, I think that Danke had a lot of the sketchy stuff, so
Mhm.
I think I used Danke. Yeah. And or you could, if you're motivated, you can make your own card from like mistakes you get on New World, making Anki cards from like mistakes that you have. That's also a really good idea.
All right. Thank you.
No worries. Any other questions? So, so I do want to just roughly go over how the process works. Again, I don't know if all of you guys are still doing your steps or if some of you have like are in a different step in the process. So this may be more relevant for you. Generally, applications get submitted in September every year. So now it's November. So the next batch would be next September. And that's like when you already have your letters of recommendation, your personal statement. You can apply for more than one specialty if you want. They won't know. They like people you apply to, they don't know that you applied for like, I don't know, internal medicine and family medicine. They won't know that, but it is something you can do. Keep in mind it means you have double the work and it's double the cost in that sense because you're applying to two separate specialties and you have to like do two separate personal statements, two separate everything. You like submit your application on ERAS in September for the next year. Residency starts in June to July. So I'll tell you my own timeline. So I graduated we're in 2024, right? Yeah. So I graduated last year in June, and then I did step two in July, end of July, and then I applied in end of September, and then I started residency in June of this year. So automatically the system makes it so you take like a 10-month, 11-month gap. Unless you can do step two and apply, sorry guys, you can apply and do your step two after fifth year. But then it can be really stressful because then if you finish medical school in June, you have to, go and start residency. So I would not recommend that personally, but because that is so stressful. I feel like medical school is already a 6-year process. I would want a break. So that's what I did. I took a 10-month to interview and then start working. So that's the process. In terms of interviews, you get interviews from like October to February. I think what is different about the American system is there's something like so let's say if you got 10 interviews, you have to rank your interviews, like your first choice, second choice, third choice. And then you basically end up getting one. So the hospitals that you also interview rank you based on like their preference of like the applicants they interviewed. And then the system matches you and then you get one job. Like you don't, it's not like you get 3 job offers and you get to choose at the end. Basically, you just interview and you send the rank list, so you don't know which place in your rank list you got until when you match, which is match day in March. So yeah, it's an interesting process. It's different than, for example, if you were to be in the UK. But yeah, it's different. I do want to have a little graph in terms of, so PGY-1 is like a first year resident match rates by applicant. So orange is the MD seniors. So this is basically American graduates who went to medical school in the US. Blue, you can ignore blue. Blue is like in the US, they have like alternative medical schools. They're called DEO, not relevant to us. Then non-US IMGs are international medical graduates who are not American and require visa. So as you can see, since 1992 till now, the match rates have increased, and around, I think it was like 55%, about 50% of non-US IMGs are matching, which is good stats. It's not bad. And US IMGs are international medical graduates who are American. So their match rate is obviously higher. They do not require visa sponsorship. So just keeping in mind that there is like a 50% something chance of matching on your first try. So yeah. And I feel like this is a lot of information and it can be overwhelming. So you might be thinking, why even do residency in the US? I think there's a lot of pluses to doing residency in the US. Residency in the US is a faster route to specialization compared to UK. There's no F1, F2. Peds residency is a 3-year program. After 3 years, you're a pediatrician. You can either work as a general pediatrician in the hospital, or you can work as an outpatient clinic pediatrician. Internal medicine is the same. It's a 3-year program. After 3 years, you can work as an internist in the hospital, general internist, or you can work as an outpatient internist, again, like a clinician. Or with peds and internal medicine, you can do further fellowship. So if you like a specific subspecialty, you can do a subspecialty fellowships, which differ in length, around 2 to 3 years extra training if you want to be a cardiologist, whether it's a peds cardiologist or an adult cardiologist. If you want to, I don't know, be an ICU doctor, it's like a 3-year program, things like that. If you want to do surgery is generally a longer program everywhere. So that's a 5-year program generally for general surgery. I do want to say doctors in US are well compensated. What I mean by that is that they're well paid. So now, obviously, as a resident, when you're in residency, like it's decent, but I think it's better than people who are a junior doctor in the US, in UK. I mean, we all know how it was with NHS and Brexit and all of that and the strikes. But definitely we're decently paid as a resident. But once you finish residency as a senior doctor, as an attending doctor, doctors are well paid here. There's a lot of opportunity for growth. And I think that is a very big attraction. Living in the US, it's a very large country. There's a lot of opportunities, a lot of different lifestyles, a lot of different like options of places to live in. It's like its own world, I feel. Living in different parts of the US is very different. So there's a place for everybody. I do want to talk about the cost. Coming to the U.S. Residency is not. It's a cost to consider. I mean, I know we all pay for medical school in Charles University or in Prague anyways, but this is like an additional cost. I think if you apply to the UK, you don't have to do a lot of things, a lot of these extra costs and buying New World, paying for step exams, doing clerkships. But I think it's like a investment that you make early on to get the results of being a senior doctor in the US. So those are all things I would consider, and I did consider when I was applying. Work hours and workload are also important things to think about. I had friends who are F1, F2s in UK, and I know that, at least from what I've heard, that they don't have to work on the weekend on a lot of rotations or a majority of rotations. You can choose to work on a weekend and you get paid extra for that. But in the US, it does not work like that. You work in the weekend. Work schedules are quite tough. So those are things to consider. Workload is probably heavier here compared to if you were to do medicine in the UK. So those are the main things. Any other specific questions that you guys have?
Hi, I have a question. Like it's a little off topic, but I'm just interested in what is your plan after residency? Like, are you gonna specialize?
Yeah. So I'm still deciding. I am thinking of specializing. And I like ICU. I like NICU, so neonatal ICU. So that's what I'm thinking about right now. But it's 3 years of, resident salary again and 3 years of heavier workload compared to a senior doctor. So it is something I'm thinking about still. That's how I feel right now. But maybe after 3 years, I'm going to be tired and I'm just going to want to work as a senior, like hospitalist. So we'll see. But right now, I'm leaning towards ICU subspecialty.
Okay, thank you. And good luck.
Thank you.
I have another question about like scheduling your clinical experience in the US. Like for me, I have this problem with like my exams that I'm probably not going to be able to fit it all like through my studies in LF1. So I heard that like if you take your clinical experience as like a graduate, then it's not going to be like hands-on. Do you know anything about it, like how it will affect my application or anything really?
Are you in 6th year?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, there's less opportunities for hands-on as a graduate, especially if you were to apply directly to like universities that want to give rotations. You can't do that as a graduate, but these private companies, like if you work through USMLE or AMO opportunities, they usually allow it, especially in a clinic setting. Some of them might be a little more strict, but you still have opportunities through USMLE, SARTI, and AMO and those organizations to get an experience that's more hands-on, but it can be a little bit harder to organize. It is still possible to get hands-on experience as a graduate. It's just harder to find, and you have to go through these organizations.
But you say it is possible, right? It's not like when you finish school, then you cannot apply to it anymore.
I know what you mean because I remember hearing this as well. It's just that the official, like if you were to do a rotation as a medical student in like a university or in like a teaching hospital, yes, in that case, you need to be a student. But going through these organizations of AM opportunities or similarly, these organizations that take a charge to arrange your rotation, in those cases, in majority of them, you can still do some hands-on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
I do want to say, because I remember this was like something that I think some people struggled with, like timing. rotations. I did step 1 after 4th year, and then I did step 2 after 6th year, like in that window before applying. Summer of 5th year, I didn't have an exam, so I used the summer of 5th year to do rotations. And we did have to do like a 4-week rotation for internal medicine. So it was like 2 birds, 1 stone to do that rotation and then do that in the US, and it counts as the rotation you have to do for medical school. So it was like I was trying to get my US clinical experience and then count that as my internal medicine elective rotation for that was required for our university as well, just to save time. And I did the same with the peds because there was like a 2-week peds elective rotation requirement, I think in 5th year again. So again, I did my peds rotation in the US and I wrote it off. I was allowed to write it off as my required peds rotation for university as well. So that saves you time. I do want to show, before I get into it, obviously, choosing a specialty or choosing where to practice should not be a financial decision, but I think it's an important driving factor for a lot of us. Personally, I picked peds. I do want to raise awareness that peds is not well compensated compared to other medical specialties in the US in comparison to other specialties. So this was not really a financial choice that I made, but I do want to show generally that US doctors are paid well. And I think it's an important thing because we spend a lot of money applying. It's a hard process. The exams are hard. So I do want to say it does pay off. Internists on average earn $282,000 a year. This is pre-tax, obviously. There's a lot of tax in the US. But I do want to say, like, it's well compensated. And if you were to do a 3-year fellowship like cardiology or GI, gastroenterology, you're paid well. And it is, there's a lot of opportunity for growth. So I think that is a huge plus of the US, which makes this process worth it. So, any other questions?
Sorry, I just wanted to know, is it possible maybe to give a general estimate of the total cost of the whole admission procedure or like this whole path?
Mm-hmm. Per rotation, I think every rotation I did was around $1,000 something. There were rotations. There are options that are much more expensive than that. I was trying to pick the cheaper ones. I think AMO tends to charge a little more also. Look into that. Sometimes there's no difference, but sometimes it is more. Other than that, so if every rotation is like 1,000, you have to do like 2 to 3, 1,000 something. So do the math, and then the cost of if you fly there, if you don't have family, you have to stay there in an Airbnb or something. If you have other friends, that's what I did. If you have other friends who are applying to the US, plan it together, and that way you can get an apartment together, live in the same city to do your rotations. Be money smart because it's an expensive process. So that is the clinical experience. The new world is usually around $400, $300, and then you have to get it for step 1, and then you have to get it again for step 2. And I do want to say you do step 3 once you start training. So you have to get it again. Now I have it for step 3. So that is another thing. But that is a cost. And then step 1 is the right thing around $900. Step 2 is the same, around $900 to $1,000. What else? Application process. depends on the specialty you apply to. There's more options, more programs you can apply to. Like internal medicine has like, I don't know, 400, 500 programs in the country that you can apply for residency. You don't have to apply to every single one because the application system charges you per program, something like that. So it's a complicated thing. But after like the first 30 programs you apply to, it charges you per program. So then obviously if you apply to more programs, you pay more. But then as an international, you want to be applying to like over 100 to 200 programs to cover yourself. So obviously that's a cost per program. So those are all things to consider. And sometimes if you have to pay for a research project to get involved, if that's what you want, that is another cost. Yeah, I think it's an expensive process that maybe, it's not realistic for some people. But if it is something that you can do, I think that the outcome is worth it. That's what personally I think. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
I can't give you a specific number, but this is like the breakdown of things I generally spent money on.
That's great. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question. For our chosen specialty, how many programs do you recommend that we kind of apply to have a good chance of matching? Is there a specific number of programs that we apply for?
For what specialty?
For example, pediatrics.
Okay. Pediatrics, like I said, internal medicine was like 400 programs. So my friends who applied to internal medicine, they applied for two more programs than I did. Peds had I think it was like 200 programs. And so there's a website, I don't remember the name. I think it's called Residency Explorer. I can put it in the chat. That you can see how, what percentage of people in that program in that hospital are international students, like international graduates. That way you don't waste your money applying to a program that does not take internationals at all because you pay per program. So I think I had 200 options that were sponsoring visas. And then I removed 40 programs that basically took 0 international students. So then I applied to 120 or 130 programs. So my application was much cheaper than was not much cheaper, but I think it was $1,000, $2,000 cheaper than $1,000 cheaper than my friends who applied to internal medicine, because there were less options, and so I applied to less places. But yeah, depends on how many options there are. So then, peds, I basically applied to everywhere that allowed me just because the number was okay. But with internal medicine, if you want to apply to every program that you can, it's 400 programs. So then you have to filter things out.
All right, thank you.
No worries.
Hi, I have a question. What type of visa did they sponsor you? Like H-1B or J-1?
So I'm on J-1. I do want to touch on that. That's a good point. I forgot. So H-1B, you can only be sponsored on H-1B if you did step 3. Step 3 is another USMLE exam that technically you have to do once you start residency. So you do it in the first year of residency, like I'm studying for step 3 right now. But you can do it early, it's allowed. And that way you can qualify for H-1B. Then when you're picking programs, you can see which program sponsors J-1 and which program sponsors H-1B. More programs sponsor J-1 compared to H-1B. So again, it's easier to match into a J-1 program or a program that has J-1 mainly than to get an H-1B. And if you were to put a program that gives H-1B first on your rank list, more people will want to go there because H-1B is a better visa. So, it's more competitive to get into that program then. But I'm on J-1.
All right, so after you do step 3, you're pretty much qualified for an H-1B, and you can transfer the visa?
You cannot transfer your visa. It's only when you're applying that if you already have your step 3, you qualify for H-1B if that hospital offers H-1B.
Oh, okay.
My hospital doesn't offer H-1B, so I have to stay on J1. And J1, you cannot leave J1 visa until you finish your program, and you're expected to like either go back to your country or do 2 to 3 years of work here in like a more underserved area, which is still in the city, but like a little bit more like an area with like more like below poverty line or minority groups type of thing. You're expected to like do that type of work for like 2 or 3 years before you can transfer your visa. So there is certain expectations that come with going on J1 visa, but it's easier to get on, it's easier to match, and if your goal is to match faster and start residency faster, it's easier.
All right, thank you.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that you're studying for the step 3 right now.
Mhm.
How do you manage your time between residency and step 3 studying? And do you think it's advisable to start before you start residency? Like you said, you had a 10-month gap. So do you
Mhm.
advise starting then or during residency?
So I could have done step 3 during my 10-month gap, correct? It wouldn't have affected my application. That was one of the reasons I did not do it, because I already applied. And so it wouldn't have affected, like, unless I did it right away, it wouldn't have affected interviews I got or how I would have ranked places, because they would not have been aware that I passed. Unless I did it really early to like announce it to programs. So that was one reason I didn't really feel like doing it, and I wanted like a break. That was one thing. Also, doing step 3 can only be done in the United States. So then I had to basically get another tourist visa to come to United States and do my step 3, and then leave and then apply for my work visa again. So it was like a lot of steps to do my step 3 to be able to, before residency. I know people who did their rotations in the US and then did step 3 at the same time. If you take a gap year, you can do that and time everything that way. But I technically did not take a gap year because I applied 2 months after, even though the system makes it so you take 10 months off. I was interviewing, so it doesn't count as a gap year. Now, balancing it during residency, it's hard. There is less pressure to do well in step 3. There's less expectations because you already matched. And if you want to do a fellowship later, they look at a lot more things other than your step 3 grade, because they look at like your recommendation letters and your performance in residency. And step 3 is an exam you do first year in residency. So much changes throughout your residency that its relevance when applying for fellowship is much, much lower. So it doesn't carry as much weight as step 2, for example. So there's less pressure to perform really well, but it is hard to time. You just have to like, right now, I have some holiday. Before this, I was on a pretty nice rotation that I had time to study in the afternoons. You have to just kind of learn to balance it, and it's really hard. But it works. There are rotations that are lighter if you're on clinic, or if your work is light, then you can study in the afternoon, whether if you're in the hospital or at home. And if you have weekends off, then you can study on the weekend. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'm not sure if you touched on this, but can you just talk again, like, about when you recommend someone should do their like US rotations, like in which year exactly?
So I think summer after 5th year, because I did step 1 after 4th year, and then I did step 2 after I just finished 6th year. So summer after 5th year I didn't do an exam. So that's when I did like 2 or 3 rotations. And I was saying it earlier that if you wanted, like, I don't know if every faculty is the same. I know in first faculty, we had to do an elective rotations, like 4 weeks for internal medicine, 2 weeks for pediatrics. So I covered those by my electives in the US. So when I did rotations in US, it counted as my elective for medical school. That way I didn't have to like go do another rotation for a month, just do science things off from medical school. So I was able to do things like 2 birds, 1 stone that way. I was saving time.
All right, I got you. Thank you.
No worries. I do want to, one last thing is, regardless of all these nice numbers that you see here, I was looking at this report of doctors if in the US if they feel fairly paid given their work demands, and 51%, which is half, said no. So even if you see these salaries, keep in mind they're pre-tax. Keep in mind that healthcare in US is a very demanding field to work in. Healthcare here is private, so a lot of things come with that work. And I feel like dynamics of like healthcare here are very different than what we see in medical school in Europe. So that is like just a challenge adapting to that. So I think there's a lot of challenges that come with it, and even with a good salary, majority of people feel that they're still not fairly paid. I just wanted to say that. I thought it was interesting. But yeah, any burning last questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned that some students do their rotations within a gap year. Just wanted to know, how does this affect the application?
One gap year is usually okay. There are programs that filter graduates out when they're like reviewing applications. If you had a gap year for like, if your graduate year was like more than 4 years ago or more than 3 years ago, but if it was like less than 3 years ago, it doesn't matter as long as you are productive in your gap year. If you have research, if you have rotations done, then it's okay. If you're like sitting at home and not doing anything in your gap year, then yeah, it's a problem. But if you're like productive, it's okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, guys, before we end?
I would like to ask a more personal question.
Yeah, sure.
And if
Yes,
I would like to ask about how you personally felt about the work-life balance as in the US now, as compared to maybe when you first came to Prague and you studied medical school here.
I think we are very lucky as medical students in Prague. I think you guys should appreciate the years you have in Prague. I compare it to med students in I'm sorry, my boyfriend. In terms of the med students in US are very overworked. Hi guys, this is Hashash. Maybe many of you know him in case he wants to come included. I apologize. Anyways, the med students in Prague are, we have a very nice schedule. That's not typical. I think a lot of times, it's very rare for us to be in a hospital at 5, 6 p.m. still in the clinic. A lot of times that doesn't happen. We don't do night shifts as students. We don't do any of that. I think a lot of medical students here do a lot of heavy rotations. They work a lot. And so I think what we do in Prague is not a huge, well representation of medical students. So obviously, if you compare it with work-life balance that we have in Prague, no, like it's not similar. But, if you are someone who likes to go out, do a lot in your life with like your free time, for sure, you can still do that in residency. But we do work a lot, and you have to be very good at time managing and prioritizing what you want to do in your free time. And it's a learning slope. Like, it is hard, but that's okay, and it's going to be hard everywhere. So
but like I think It's a lot better than we expected. Like we still do have time to go out. We still do have time to have fun. It's just not the same as Prague. It's just
Prague is too good, guys. So
I didn't expect you to say that we had an easy life here. But so integration in the US was also quite easy. Yeah.
I think integration in US is much easier than integration in Prague. I would say
with the society.
it's very multicultural here. Everybody is very welcoming. In that sense, it's much easier. The integration here is much easier. Everything's in English, and that's a big plus. And I personally, that was a big. I know a lot of people go to Germany for residency. For me, I could not see myself like again like this is my life of living somewhere where I don't understand the language. Not feeling comfortable. So, wanting to interact comfortably with my patients was a big thing. And we have that here, and the integration is much better. I'm sure a lot of you know, like there is a community of every culture in the US, and you can for sure find your community.
Thank you so
People are a lot
much.
friendlier than they are in Prague.
Yeah,
In general, like
the average person.
like in your if you're interviewing, you will see like the main thing that we're looking at in your interview really is going to be how friendly you are
Yeah,
when you're interacting with everyone. And so they really try to pick out just people who can be friendly at any situation. And so that's all you're going to be interacting with, honestly. So
Okay, good to know. Thank you both.
no worries. Guys, any other questions?
Yeah.
Sorry, do you want to go first?
You go first. Yeah, that's fine.
I just wanted to ask if you don't mind sharing how many research publications you did to like get matched with peds.
Okay, I did
38.
I did two. 2 or 3? 2. I did 2, I think. Again, I think for peds, there isn't a huge emphasis on research. So I did 2 because that's physically what I was able to do before applying. If you can do more, kudos to you for sure. I do want to say, yeah, it's not a huge driving factor in peds. It's a nice thing to have, but
All right, thank you.
no worries.
So my question is kind of related to the previous question. Like, what would count as a publication?
Case studies, literature reviews, case series. If you are involved in like a proper research, if you go through like USMLE, SARTI, and all those organizations, you can pay to be part of like a meta-analysis. It's like a more extensive research. Or if again, I had friends who did research projects with our university for years, and then eventually they published. So they publish like a proper paper with like actual like the collected data from patients and stuff. So then anything that gets published in a journal does not matter if it's not like a huge journal.
Thank you.
I think as long as you try to get some research, try to get it published, all they would want to see, I think, was something that's underemphasized. But volunteering, if you guys have volunteering experience, they really like that. Like, if you're not going for a big academic program, they're not gonna want that much research. Honestly, if you have like other things that show you're interested, here with like elderly, if you have like disabled people.
That you asked, I think you said an abstract at university. Do you mean like at our university, at Charles University?
It's not Charles, but different university, but it's the same idea. We did a project with a presentation and abstract.
Okay, so when you're applying, there is a place to separately put if you presented a project, like there is a place for that. And I urge you, if you did do an abstract and a project, you can always publish it on journals that are easier to publish. There are a lot of them if you Google, and it's just like a big plus for you guys. Max, you'll pay like $20 each if there's like 3 of you or 4 of you, and then you have a publication under your name, and you can do that in a low impact journal as a medical student. You don't have to be a doctor to do that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Someone else had a question.
Yes, I have a question. So for me, I'm doing basic research, but it's way more difficult to publish because of the nature of the research. So in this case, is it still like, is it viewed like on the same level, even if I don't publish?
I think I know that a lot of people were doing like research in anatomy or histology type of thing. I think any sort of, if you were actively involved in a research project, that is a great like talking point, and it's something that makes you stand out. And in your like when you apply and in your interviews, they will for sure ask you about it, even if it's not something you published. As being involved in an active research project looks really nice, even then. And if eventually, I would always like urge you to talk with your senior doctor that you work with on a project if it is possible to publish it in any way.
And try to make it sound like it's relevant to whichever specialty that you're.
Yeah, like make it so like maybe you can emphasize the part that's like relevant. I don't know if it's like an anatomy project and you're interested in like surgery, or if it's like, I don't know if it's specific to specific like system, if it's like cardiology and you want to do internal medicine and you're telling them I'm more interested in cardiology right now, then it's like relevant, that type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Anyone else?
Yeah, I had a bit of a broad question. Do you think it would be easier if you just, if you're in your first year, if you moved to the US and just did 8 years of medicine there and then started like residency in the US? Or do you think it's the same if you're an international student in Charles and you're an international student in the US? Do you think it makes a difference?
Are you a first year student?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. So I mean, I considered like following the US path because I had my sister here. Couple factors made it unattractive to me. One was cost. Doing a bachelor's college degree in US and then doing 4 years of medical school is very expensive. Very expensive. It's way more expensive than it is in Prague to do 6 years. Then you save 2 years by doing a medical school in Prague. I think we're both like the youngest people in our residency program. Like, it's really nice to be really young and already starting your residency, and that's a big plus, and it feels like it's faster. It's a faster route. It is harder to go from a European medical school to residency. You are less competitive compared to an American applicant, American graduate. But I think if you just push and do all of that, I think it eventually is a faster route. I think it's like a easier route in that sense. And medical school in Prague is a much chiller experience compared to medical school in the US, from my experience that I see the medical students here, whatever they do. And it's very competitive to get into medical school in the US. Even if you do 4 years of college degree and now you have to apply to get into medical school, you might not get it in the first round. It's a whole so for me, that's what
Yeah, so is it easier for a US medical student to do what they want?
Yes.
100%. Like there is no comparison. It's a lot easier. But do I regret going through the Prague system?
Not at all.
Not for a minute. But then again, like we are lucky we wanted specialties that are more IMG friendly. If you want like a more surgical, like if you want a surgical subspecialty,
if you're thinking like plastics, I mean, actually, Jose.
Sure. It's possible, yes, sure. But would I have risked my 6 years for it?
No. Yeah.
Yeah, but I definitely don't regret it. Like, if you do want a surgical subspecialty, I don't advise to stay in Prague.
So sorry, you said if you want to do something surgical, you shouldn't stay in Prague, or it doesn't matter?
If you want to do general surgery,
you can.
Sure, you have a decent chance. If if it's something else, it's your chance is like less than 10%, less than 5%. Whereas for like IM it's like 40, for like peds it's like 50. Yeah.
But what's if you do like you go to the US, you do internal medicine, can you then switch over? Is it easier then to switch into surgical if you're already in the US? Or it doesn't matter?
We wouldn't do that because of how hard this process is to reapply again. I think if you were dead set on like orthopedic surgery, yeah, as an IMG, that's not going to be realistic. I was telling him just now, we had someone who was 2 years or 1 year, our senior, I don't remember. He did, I think, 1 year of plastic surgery, like research in the US, and then applied.
And he had so many connections.
He had a lot of connections. He had to do research for, I think, 2 years before matching into plastic surgery. Keep in mind, like, even then, he's not going to match into LA, you know, like, it's like, you have to, like, it's a huge, lengthy process to get into a very, very competitive specialty like plastic surgery or dermatology or orthopedic surgery, because, you know, so it's not impossible, but you have to put years of research after graduating. And, you know, that for me, that was, I mean, anyways, I was not interested in those things, so it didn't matter.
Like, it's already really difficult to get into one of the IMG friendly specialties. It's difficult, but it's definitely doable. 100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, for a non-IMG friendly one, you have to do everything.
Yeah, like,
does it make a difference if, like, in all of your summers and whatever, before you apply to the US, you do like a lot of internships in the US? Does that make any difference?
Yes. Yes. If you have been basically involved in the American healthcare system from the start of your medical career, yes, it makes a difference.
If you have an attending over there, a program director, who's gonna be like, I like this person, I want this person on my team, that's it.
If you have
matched.
a connection,
You matched.
if you have a really good connection, that will drive your application.
Regardless of the specialty, if you have one big shot guy here, that's it, you're done. No, honestly.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, guys, my boyfriend is in internal medicine, by the way. If you guys don't know him, he's in DC. But yeah, before we sign off, any last questions? I know, like, a lot of you guys might have questions. That's why I've given you last chance. Okay. All right, guys.
I have a question. More about the interviews. Like, what are they like, and what type of questions do they ask during the interviews and stuff?
Interviews are mainly for them to see that you're a friendly and nice person to work with. They ask a little bit about, like, your work experiences, rotations, volunteer experiences. What do you do in your free time? How do you manage stress? Those type of things. That you can, like, find a bunch of questions online and prepare. They'll ask a lot, like, about, like, your background of where you grew up, how was your medical school experience, you know. There's not a huge number of applicants from Prague or Europe, so a lot of times for me they had questions about that, like, how was that for you, because it was, like, different. They weren't used to seeing applicants from Prague. So yeah, I think it's not like they don't ask you, like, medical questions, because your grades speak for itself.
If they ask you medical questions, don't go to them.
That's a red flag. Yeah.
It's a red flag if they ask you something. I don't know, if they set up like a clinical scenario and then they ask you
if they ask you, like an ethical scenario, that's a different thing. But if they ask you, like, a patient comes in with whatever, what would you do next?
Yeah, or, like, if they say, like, how do you present this patient, like, on rounds, that's not okay. But if they're asking you, like, how do you handle a difficult patient, or what was an experience you had, like, a patient who, I don't know, was, like, suicidal or something, and how you handled it, that's okay, because they want to see your, like, social skills and your management skills. But if they're asking you, like, your knowledge or how do you present a patient clinically, that's not okay. Yeah,
because like they can see your grade, like, even if you don't know that one situation, they can see your grade, they know your overall, like, if that's not enough for them,
Yeah.
It's a bad program.
And also just one last question. To get internships and things like that in the US, do you think it's always better to go through those how do you say again, those organized programs?
Yeah.
Or
No, if you have connections to go through, it is better. There are, if you Google, like, I know like SUNY downstate and upstate are like universities and hospitals in New York that you could apply as a medical student to do rotations there. Those are really good. Or I know University of Illinois and Chicago would have the same program. You just have to Cleveland Clinic. If you have to time it, you can do that. Those are the ideal ones. Personally, neither of us timed it well, and we wanted to match really fast. That was our priority. So we did not get to do that. But usually when you don't pay and you go through a connection, because I did one of those, it was more like an observership. I didn't get as much hands-on experience, and hands-on experience gives the doctor more opportunities to write you a good letter and more opportunities for you to learn things and learn the healthcare system. So that's the truth.
We learned a lot. No, honestly, we genuinely learned a lot.
Yeah, but yeah, so I think the paid one gives you an opportunity to get more hands-on a lot of times.
Okay, thank you.
Like basically, yeah, get what you can. Like whatever you can do, do.
Yeah, it's nice.
Thank you very much.
No worries. Any last questions? All right, guys.
Around what time in your like 6 years of med school did you know that you want to go for the US? And until what time would you say is a good like time to know for sure and like start preparing?
Okay, if you have family in US, then obviously it's something you're thinking about anyways. I had some family, so from the start, it was something that was on my radar. After I did my step, like I said it earlier that if you do step, I think I always recommend doing step 1 before going on a rotation, because rotations are expensive, they're time consuming. Going on a rotation and then not passing step 1 is not motivating. I would always say do your step 1 first, and generally that's after 4th year. So, and then, like, for me that was like okay, I passed my step 1, so then I can go. Like if it was like a reassuring thing for me that I can do it, and then yeah. So for me that was that, and then there's never, but it's background. And then, but it's never like a late, like I know people who graduated and then started the process, and that's okay. There's never a late time. If you decide later, it's okay.
But the sooner you do it, the sooner you make attending salary. So.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if you want to like get a really competitive specialty and you go do internships from first year, yes, go do that. But yeah.
Just a really
Like-
quick question. Oh, sorry, go.
Thank you. Like for me, I'm in 4th year and I'm thinking of cardiology mainly. So like I'm thinking of giving USMLE like in the fall of 5th year. Is that like a good start?
I would recommend doing step 1 after 4th year, not after 5th year. Using the summer of 5th year for you to do rotations, and then doing your step 2 after like during 6th year or after 6th year. So I would recommend doing step 1 after 4th year, especially now that it's pass and fail. Also, I do want to remind, because I was talking about this earlier, that cardiology is a fellowship. You cannot directly go into cardiology. You will go into internal medicine for 3 years. You can emphasize in like your motivation letters that you're interested in cardiology, but still you will be matching into internal medicine. So you should focus on having rotations generally in internal medicine. You can have research in cardiology and emphasize, hey, this is the field I'm leaning towards, but you want to show that you understand internal medicine.
And also, if you want to do cardiology or gastroenterology, you want to try to get into the best internal medicine program that you can get into, because they are pretty competitive fellowships. So yeah, I think what Behsheed is right. You should do step one as soon as possible so that you can get working on your actual application after that.
All right, guys.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to do one last question if you have.
It's just a really quick one, and I don't know. I'm sorry if this is rude, but how old are you and your boyfriend? Because you said that you guys are way younger than the people in your program. Like, how old are you and compared to the others?
I'm 16.
I'm 25. And you're 24? Okay, he's 24. I'm 25.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. All right, guys. Yeah, the majority of people are like first years are 27. 27 is a pretty common age. Yeah, 28. You'll see older. Yeah. All right, guys. It was really nice talking to all of you. I hope that we got to answer your questions, and I think you guys found it helpful, useful. So all the best.
I wanted to thank you from my part, from the UIMS team,
Right.
Dr. Barootkoob, really, for this
No
really
worries.
informative presentation. We truly appreciate you taking the time to inform us on the topic, really.
Oh.
And guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and we are really looking forward to see you on our next education event.
Okay. Okay. Bye, guys.
Thank you again very much.
No worries.
Thank you.
Bye.